Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. Minneapolis is on edge as a fatal shooting is drawing nationwide attention. Protesters today physically confronting ICE officers. The White House says President Trump has a three-phase plan to stabilize Venezuela and a possible massive military budget increase, plus a key meeting between Trump and Colombia's president. The Senate is voting on a war powers resolution aimed at blocking President Trump from further military action against Venezuela without congressional authorization. The Trump administration is pulling the U.S. out of 66 international organizations, many tied to the UN. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says they push ideology over American interests. The U.S. trade deficit has dropped to its lowest level since 2009. Data from the Commerce Department shows the goods and services trade gap narrowing.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today's Thursday, January 8th. I'm Stephanie Cox. In Minneapolis, the shooting death of a woman by an ICE officer is drawing national attention. The Trump administration says it was an act of self-defense in the face of terror. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz disagreeing. A warning, this report contains footage that some viewers may find disturbing. Here's the story.
The Trump administration is responding to the fatal shooting of a woman by ICE officers in Minneapolis. Officials say the woman tried to engage in an act of domestic terrorism, and the officer who shot her acted in self-defense. Several videos of the incident have emerged, showing the woman in her car and ICE officers around the vehicle. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem held a press conference after Wednesday's incident, saying she wanted to reiterate the facts of what happened.
She then proceeded to weaponize her vehicle, and she attempted to run a law enforcement officer over. This appears as an attempt to kill or to cause bodily harm to agents, an act of domestic terrorism. The ICE officer, fearing for his life and the other officers around him and the safety of the public, fired defensive shots.
Noem said the incident occurred as officers were trying to move their vehicle, which had become stuck in the snow. Public opinion over the video is divided. However, President Trump said on Truth Social, the woman driving the car violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer who seems to have shot her in self-defense. City council members identify the woman as 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good. Noem said she had been impeding ICE officers.
ICE officers and agents approached the vehicle of the individual in question, who was blocking the officers in with her vehicle, and she had been stalking and impeding their work all throughout the day. ICE agents repeatedly ordered her to get out of the car and to stop obstructing law enforcement, but she refused to obey their commands.
Noem said the officer who fired the shot was injured in the incident and treated at a local hospital. She called the incident preventable, a sentiment echoed by Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Walz, however, blamed the Trump administration's increased immigration enforcement operations for sparking violence.
We have been warning for weeks that the Trump administration's dangerous, sensationalized operations are a threat to our public safety, that someone was going to get hurt. Just yesterday, I said exactly that.
Walz called on the public not to engage in violence as they protest.
To Minnesotans, I say this: I feel your anger. I'm angry. They want a show. We can't give it to them. We cannot. If you protest and express your First Amendment rights, please do so peacefully, as you always do. We can't give them what they want.
The Trump administration, on the other hand, blames rhetoric from the left for inflaming tensions. Border czar Tom Homan said on X, the incident is a result of hateful rhetoric and violent attacks against the men and women of ICE and Border Patrol. And in a post yesterday, the Department of Homeland Security said its officers are facing a 1,300% increase in assaults against them and an 8,000% increase in death threats. Vice President J.D. Vance took to X saying, to the radicals assaulting them, doxing them, and threatening them, congratulations, we're going to work even harder to enforce the law. Crowds gathered on Wednesday to hold a vigil for the woman killed. By evening, there were hundreds of protesters, some holding anti-ICE signs. Minneapolis schools have canceled classes Thursday and Friday out of an abundance of caution, citing protests sparked by the shooting.
Minneapolis is on edge following that ICE shooting yesterday. Federal officials say the woman tried to attack ICE agents, calling it an act of domestic terrorism. Several people protested at a federal building in Minneapolis this morning. They chanted slogans against ICE, with some of the protesters physically confronting law enforcement. Reports say federal officers had to fire pepper balls at the protesters to contain the crowd. Vice President J.D. Vance commenting on yesterday's deadly incident, he suggested the deceased woman was the instigator in the situation. Vance said, quote, "She was obstructing a lawful enforcement operation," and continuing, he said, "You're not allowed to walk up to or drive up to people who are enforcing the law to make it harder for them to do their jobs." The vice president went on to say that the officer didn't discharge his weapon to prevent her from fleeing. When he discharged his weapon, she had pointed the vehicle at him and pressed the gas. He discharged his weapon in self-defense. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is now calling on people to remain calm as tensions remain high. And our thoughts are with the family of the woman who lost her life in that terrible scene as well. FBI Director Kash Patel says the Bureau is investigating anti-immigration enforcement protests. He spoke to Just the News Today. Patel said agents are looking into protest organizers and funders. He said the protests may be impeding law enforcement operations and endangering public safety. Patel said the FBI is investigating paid protest campaigns nationwide. The review includes organizers, protesters, and funding sources. He said those campaigns may be driving illicit activities. Efforts are underway to stabilize Venezuela after the ouster of former dictator Nicolas Maduro. President Trump's plan will play out in 3 primary phases. NTD's Daniel Monahan breaks it down for us.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio described the initial step for Venezuela as a stabilization effort, saying the U.S. can't let the country descend into chaos. In the first phase, he said the U.S. will continue to exercise control over access to Venezuela's oil resources.
They are not generating any revenue from their oil right now. They can't move it unless we allow it to move, because we have sanctions, because we're enforcing those sanctions.
The second phase will focus on recovery, which Rubio says involves what he calls fair access to the Venezuela market by American and other companies, as well as healing.
At the same time, begin to create the process of reconciliation nationally within Venezuela, so that the opposition forces can be amnestied and released and from prisons or brought back to the country and begin to rebuild civil society.
The plan will ultimately conclude with a transition of power.
It's where we have tremendous control and leverage over what those interim authorities are doing and are able to do. But obviously this will be a process of transition. In the end, it will be up to the Venezuelan people to transform their country.
President Trump yesterday proposed increasing the Pentagon's budget to $1.5 trillion in 2027, a 66% increase, saying it would give the United States its dream military. Trump says the world is going through very troubled and dangerous times. Over to Colombia. President Trump yesterday said he spoke on the phone with Colombian President Gustavo Petro, calling the conversation a great honor and announcing plans for an in-person meeting at the White House. Trump said Petro initiated the call to discuss Colombia's stance on drugs and address other areas of disagreement between the two countries. The friendly tone is a change from earlier in the week, when Trump criticized the nation over its role in the illegal drug trade.
Colombia is very sick, too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States, and he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you.
The president seemed open to taking action.
He has cocaine mills and cocaine factories. He's not going to be doing it very long.
So there will be an operation by the U.S.
It sounds good to me.
Petro said yesterday that Trump pulled back on his tone during a conversation that lasted roughly an hour. He said he had invited Trump for a private meeting, but instead the pair decided to hold talks in Washington.
In regard to this personal conversation, we shouldn't put our guard down. We still have to talk at the White House.
The sudden détente revealed that Petro and Trump share a key characteristic, an apparent willingness to negotiate with an adversary if deemed to be in their country's best interest.
For Colombia, the U.S. remains critical for the military's fight against leftist guerrillas. For the U.S., Colombia is the main source of intelligence used to interdict drugs in the Caribbean. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Thank you, Daniel. And the United States could be dealing with Venezuela for an extensive period of time. President Trump was asked by the New York Times how long the administration would demand direct oversight of the nation. Trump did not give a definitive answer, replying, quote, "Only time will tell." When the Times questioned if it could take a year or longer, Trump said, quote, "I would say much longer." During the nearly 2-hour sit-down, Trump said the rebuilding process will be profitable and will include the taking of oil. And the government today released video showing a Coast Guard ship sailing alongside the Russian-flagged Marinera oil tanker. The U.S. seized the tanker yesterday. The U.S. had been pursuing the tanker since last month after it tried to evade a blockade on sanctioned oil vessels around Venezuela. The U.S. seized 2 Venezuela-linked oil tankers yesterday, including the Marinera. The Justice Department is investigating crew members of the Marinera for failing to obey Coast Guard orders. Attorney General Pam Bondi said criminal charges will be pursued against all responsible actors. In response, Russia said the U.S. seizure of its oil tanker is illegal. The Russian Foreign Ministry has demanded that the American side ensure humane and dignified treatment of Russian crew members. Next, Venezuela was the focus of a vote today on Capitol Hill. The Senate advanced a bipartisan war powers resolution to limit further attacks on Venezuela and set up a vote for final passage. The vote was 52 to 47. The resolution would block President Trump from taking further military action against Venezuela without congressional approval. The vote came when the administration ramped up military pressure on the country with attacks on boats off its coast in September. Republicans have blocked all of the measures, but the last vote was just 49 to 51, with 2 senators from Trump's party joining Democrats in backing a resolution in November. But to become law, the resolution would have to pass the Republican-led House, and then it would have to survive an expected Trump veto, which would require 2/3 majorities in both chambers. A showdown on Capitol Hill today. The House will vote on whether to override President Trump's vetoes of 2 bills. Trump issued the first 2 vetoes of his second term in late December. One bill was designed to help finance the construction of a water pipeline in Colorado for safe drinking water. Trump cited the cost of the project in his decision. The other would designate a site in Everglades National Park in Florida as part of an Indian reservation. To override the vetoes, both the House and Senate would need a 2/3 majority vote. The House is expected to meet that threshold, while it's not certain whether the Senate will hold a vote. House Speaker Mike Johnson says he plans to vote to sustain the vetoes despite bringing a vote on the measure. Democratic Congressman Steny of Maryland announced today that he's set to retire at the end of his term.
I have decided not to seek another term in the People's House. I make this decision with sadness, for I love this House, an institution the framers designed to reflect the will of the American people and to serve as the guardian of their liberty and their democracy.
In an interview with the Washington Post, Hoyer said he decided to step down while spending time with his family over the holiday season. He said, quote, "I did not want to be one of those members who clearly outstayed his or her ability to do the job." The 86-year-old is the 3rd longest-serving House member and the longest-serving Democrat in Congress. He previously served as Majority Leader. Prior to heading the U.S. House, Hoyer spent more than 10 years in the Maryland State Senate. In Pennsylvania, Governor Josh Shapiro says he's running for a second term. He's promising to get things done and says he hopes other Democrats will win alongside him in November. Shapiro is expected to face Republican State Treasurer Stacey Garrity. She's an Army veteran who says she tried to fight for consumers. And reality TV personality Spencer Pratt says he plans to run for mayor of Los Angeles. Pratt lost his home in last year's deadly Palisades fire. He made the announcement yesterday at a fire advisory rally criticizing state and local officials. The Republican rose to fame with his wife Heidi Montag on the hills. He accused leaders, including Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass, of failing to prevent the fire that killed 12 people and devastated the region. The Commerce Department reports that the U.S. trade deficit dropped in October to its lowest level since 2009. Data shows the goods and services trade gap narrowed by 39% from September to $29.4 billion. Imports into the U.S. fell 3.2% to $331 billion in October, with exports jumping to $302 billion. Goods imports dropped 4.5% to $255 billion, the lowest level since June 2023. Imports of industrial supplies dropped to $2.7 billion, the lowest level since February 2021. Exports rose 2.6% to a record $302 billion. Goods exports jumped 3.8% to $195.9 billion, an all-time high. Separate polls of economists and analysts by Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal had predicted a $58 billion deficit. The Trump administration has withdrawn the United States from 66 international organizations, conventions, and treaties. The White House said yesterday they go against the country's interests. 31 entities were tied to the United Nations, while 35 others were not. The State Department says the Trump administration found the institutions to be redundant, wasteful, and poorly run. It also accused them of being captured by foreign interests or a threat to the nation's sovereignty, freedoms, and general prosperity. Secretary of State Marco Rubio accused many entities of being dominated by progressive ideology and detached from national interests. Rubio says many international organizations now serve a globalist project rooted in the, quote, discredited fantasy of the end of history. He mentioned DEI mandates, gender equality campaigns, and what he called climate orthodoxy. House Speaker Mike Johnson has formally invited President Trump to deliver the State of the Union address on February 24th. The speech will be Trump's first formal State of the Union of his second term and his sixth joint address to Congress overall. Trump is expected to highlight immigration enforcement, policy achievements, and foreign policy efforts as the midterm elections approach. New York State is expanding free child care. New York Governor Kathy Hochul and New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani announced the initiative today.
And today I'm proud to announce that New York State is paying the full cost to launch 2Care for the first time. Universal daycare for 2-year-olds as proposed by Mayor Mamdani. And we're not just paying for 1 year of the program. We don't usually go 1 year out in our budget. But just to let you know how serious we are, we're taking the unprecedented step to not just commit for the 2027 budget, which I'm working on right now, but also the following year as well, to show you we're in this for the long haul.
We will build on the city's existing 3K program and say no longer will a family in Flatbush be offered a seat but have to find out that that seat is in Astoria. We will add seats in the neighborhoods where demand has not been met. This will be felt by expanded subsidies for tens of thousands of additional families. It will be felt when parents look at their bank accounts at the end of the year and see that they have saved more than $20,000 per child.
For Mamdani, the announcement is a step toward fulfilling one of his primary campaign promises. According to Governor Hochul's office, the first year will focus on high-need areas selected by the city before expanding. New York will then work to expand access to universal pre-K statewide, aiming for the 2028 to 29 school year. Hochul is up for re-election this year. And Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem addressing illegal immigration in New York City today. DHS increased law enforcement efforts after 2 illegal immigrants attacked Customs and Border Protection officers, shooting one of them.
The American people deserve dignity, they deserve justice, and we deliver both. So we launched Operation Salvo. We've arrested 54 individuals as a part of Operation Salvo since its inception just a few months ago. Those arrested are violent transnational gang members.
After the attack on the officers in July, Homeland Security published this video of the incident. According to Noem, one of the 2 CBP agents was shot in the face. The department says it believes the 2 immigrants tried to rob the officers. They fired shots when the agents resisted. According to DHS, one of the individuals is an illegal immigrant from the Dominican Republic. He had previously been charged with felony grand larceny, assault, and more. Vice President J.D. Vance says embattled Minnesota Governor Tim Walz should resign. Vance accuses him of failing to address what he called widespread welfare fraud, speaking on Fox News.
What's going on in Minneapolis, I think, is actually representative of a broader fraud scheme that we're going to see all over the country. We're going to see it in California. We're going to see it in other places, too, where people get rich from the American taxpayer. The Somalian fraud, for example, daycare fraud. You've got Americans, we've got programs set up to make it easier for Americans to get their kids in daycare so they can have proper child care. You take that money and you siphon it off to Somalian fraudsters. That's a double theft. Number one, that means a lot of American families can't afford their child care. Number two, that means a lot of American taxpayers are being fleeced. It's totally unacceptable.
Vance says federal investigators are going to get to the root of the problem. The vice president says anyone found to be involved will be prosecuted. The allegations come as federal authorities expand investigations into benefit programs across multiple states. Vance also criticized the high number of welfare recipients in the Somalian community. He says about 85% of Somalians in the U.S. collect some form of welfare. Vance says those high numbers show a problem with vetting. Meanwhile, Governor Walz is pushing back on claims he's turned a blind eye to the fraud allegations. In multiple statements, Walz said his administration has been confronting the issue. And the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services says it's going to claw back fraud funds from Minnesota. Dr. Mehmet Oz, the agency's administrator, said all 14 Medicaid programs that Minnesota flagged as vulnerable to fraud will be audited as part of the process. Joining us to discuss is Tim Dosher, Executive Director of Unleash Prosperity Now. Tim, good to have you with us today. First, your reaction to the agency's move.
Well, if Walz has been doing his best to reduce fraud, then I've got a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn. I mean, there is this, it is incredible. By the way, his resignation, him saying he's not going to run again, is evidence enough that there is so much there that he has been involved in and known about. Look, this is not anything new. This was going on in the Department of Justice under Biden. Merrick Garland started inquiry in this in 2022 with the Somali fraud. This has been happening. And so I think that the federal government now is actually making something of it, thanks to this great independent journalist who brought this to light. And I think that it's absolutely something that we need to look at. And the federal government is 100% with legal authority in their right to claw this money back.
So Governor Walz also criticized the president for clamping down on Somalis, making it about race. What do you see as the crux of the problem in the state?
So look, if you want to say this is about race, you can say that, but all you're doing is you're continuing to stoke the vitriol and the outrage and the protest on the left. That's all he's trying to do. He's community organizing. He's picking a target and he's going after it, and he's calling it race. I think what people in the Trump administration are doing, and those of us who are actually upset about wasting taxpayer money for enriching, people who are fraudsters, basically, I think that we're just upset about fraud. We're just upset about people breaking the law and taking taxpayer dollars that we already have very little of and using it towards enriching one particular community. So if one particular community is getting wealthy off of something, I would turn that racism accusation and I would focus it on the group that's being enriched and all the many of us who are not.
So to your point here, the Medicaid administrator, Dr. Oz, also says California may be misspending a large amount of Medicaid money. Meanwhile, critics accuse the administration of targeting blue states. At yesterday's fraud hearing, several Republican lawmakers said that they do want to attack fraud in any state where it occurs, regardless of political leanings. But what are your thoughts on these two diverging?
Any fraud, this isn't a red state, blue state thing, although I think that we're going to find that I'm sure in red states there's fraud in circumstances, and we have law enforcement to enforce those laws. But I think that you're going to find if you go into a state with an $18 billion deficit, even though you have a massive population, massive industry, massive amount of economic activity happening like you do in California, if you still have an $18 billion deficit, you are relying on federal money to keep your state afloat. So I'm sorry, but if it's that bad, if you have that big of a deficit, yeah, we need to take a look at that state and we need to see who is getting it. Also, anywhere that's a sanctuary, quote unquote, sanctuary city and they're getting federal dollars, that also needs to be looked because the federal dollars toward illegals are not supposed to happen in this country. So yes, we should be looking at every single state. Fraud probably exists in every single state. But I think that you're going to find in bluer states like New York, like California, like Minnesota, you're going to find a heck of a lot more.
And also yesterday, Congressman Walter Hudson said Minnesota's fraud issue is actually about a culture of profiting from government programs in perpetuity, not as a safety net, but as an industry. Do you see that elsewhere in the country, and how would you remedy it?
Yeah, I see that from both sides of the aisle. This didn't just happen overnight. This happened because Democrats and Republicans have continued to pass continuing resolutions to keep funding what they've been funding. It's on autopilot, basically. So any money that the federal government is giving out, that's been approved by Congress and signed by the president. So this is a bipartisan issue, and you got to give credit to President Trump for opening the door to the DOGE culture, where we are tired of waste, fraud, and abuse, and we're going to go after it. What that's going to take, though, is it's going to take will from Congress to sort of join with the president to claw some of this money back, to reform the entitlement programs. Look, there's an incredible number. We give transfer payments now $5 trillion a year out to the United States of America. This is an incredible number, and that number has increased by $1.7 trillion since COVID. That's a short amount of time and a heck of a lot of money. And if you think that there's free of fraud, then you're crazy. It absolutely should have scrutiny, and we need to join together bipartisanly to do it.
Looking at another bipartisan issue, in a sense, testimony at yesterday's hearing warned of whistleblower retaliation among DHS leadership. How should that be dealt with, in your view?
Well, look, I think that, transparency is the biggest thing in federal government. I think that you want to make sure that you give people the ability to report claims, to report things that are wrong. And we need to stay away from the Biden culture of weaponizing the Department of Justice, weaponizing the DHS, weaponizing the institutions of government. And so I think that more transparency, the better, and to stop using government entities to do anything but enforce the laws that are on the books and carry out their constitutional duty. It's pretty much as simple as that.
Good to speak with you today, Tim Dosher. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you. Have a great one.
And Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Public Safety Commissioner Bob Jacobson are now holding a press conference over the fatal ICE shooting yesterday. Let's tune in.
Last night, peacefully. They shared a message about the reckless ICE mobilization is not keeping us safe and led to the tragedy that the world witnessed once again. To Minnesota, I say thank you. There's strength in numbers, there's power in peace, and what we saw was a beautiful vigil to a life that we're starting to learn more about. And I will let those that want to push out false narratives, to slander or defame Renee Good, Minnesotans will tell her life story. Minnesotans will be there to defend her honor and see this as a human being, not a moment in time or the callous casualness that I've watched some people on TV gloss over what they saw. We've also spent a lot of time talking last 24 hours about accountability. That means no function of government operates with impunity. It means when someone's in a position of authority and they commit any act that impacts our people, there has to be another place to turn to get justice. Checks and balances. Basic idea, the center of the formation of our country. It's the only measure that protects us from the abuse of government or federal overreach or tyrannical government. Yesterday, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the BCA, spent the day yesterday attempting to get that accountability. We have learned that the Trump administration has now denied the state that ability to participate in the investigation. And I just want to make this as clear as possible to everyone. Minnesota must be part of this investigation. These are nonpartisan career professionals that have spent years building the trust of the community. There's a BCA Force Investigations Unit that was created by the legislature, by the people of Minnesota, to provide an independent, consistent, and trusted mechanism for investigating the use of force incidents involving law enforcement officers. Minnesota has seen our share of these. And what you've seen is, and I have witnessed it during my time, that these professionals have risen to the moment. They are trusted by people. People who are not by inclination trusting of law enforcement or government have come to see the professionals at the BCA as true arbitrators that can get them justice. The unit is the result of years of scrutiny, public engagement, and bipartisan legislative action. Minnesotans have made it clear time and again they expect transparency through this process where a police officer uses deadly force. The BCA, Commissioner, Superintendent Evans, have earned that trust by delivering on that expectation. I think it's clear to everyone as they saw this that it feels now that Minnesota has been taken out of the investigation. It feels very, very difficult that we will get a fair outcome. And I say that only because people in positions of power have already passed judgment, from the president to the vice president to Kristi Noem, have stood and told you things that are verifiably false, verifiably inaccurate. They have determined the character of a 37-year-old mom that they didn't even don't know. They've determined that the actions are done. I don't know. I've not used inflammatory terms of what happened. I've asked us to find the answers. The only way we find the answers is a thorough investigation by nonpartisan professionals. We've delivered that. We've been able to do it. We've earned the trust. And when I say that, the trust of BCA, and I tell Minnesotans the trust of law enforcement here. Everyone knows, globally, certainly here, that George Floyd, who was murdered a few blocks from this site, tore at the soul of who we were. But we healed, we built back trust. Chief Brian O'Hara came in and took one of the most difficult jobs in America of building back trust in the police force in Minneapolis after Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd. And he's earned that. And he's level, and he's fair, and he's asking for that. And so, Minnesotans, I will continue to press that we be part of the investigation, that we do the investigation, so that Minnesotans can trust what the outcome is. I don't have a predetermined notion. Yes, I saw the video. Yes, I saw that. But a thorough investigation will see what happened before that. It will take all factors in, and it will come up with a fair and just conclusion. And we will accept that. Very, very difficult for Minnesotans to think in any way this is going to be fair when Kristi Noem was judge, jury, and basically executioner yesterday. That's very, very difficult to think that they were going to be fair. With that being said, Minnesotans, we've risen to the occasion so far, but it's going to get challenging. It's going to be challenging because I feel your anger. The human desire to lash out in this moment is very real. I can tell you that that is the wish of many people, that they fulfill the wish they want to see us turn on one another, turn towards violence rather than peaceful reconciliation, rather than peaceful civil disobedience. And we have to do our best to not play into that. I say this too when I saw yesterday some of the anger, whether it's Minneapolis Police, Minnesota State Patrol, Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, Minnesota National Guard. They are there to protect and serve, as it said. They are there to protect Minnesotans. Throwing your anger at them only inflames the situation. And I know some of you were up at the Whipple building this morning, and to the press who are here, I saw some of this myself. Thank you. Continue to have access to every single space. Continue to cover this story. Continue to show the world what's out there. I will say it where our president won't. The press are the defenders of our democracy. You need to be there. But I also tell folks, protect our Minnesotans who are out there and don't turn the anger to them. This is a brazen use of force. They want us to bend the knee. They want us to capitulate. The way we give them what they want is allow them to use this as an excuse to put more troops on the ground. Use them as an excuse to show that these are violent protests. And I also witnessed what I think is going to be a pattern over the next few days and the coming hours, is I saw an individual show up there with the intent to antagonize folks who were peacefully protesting, with a bullhorn to scream at them. And again, the desire to move on that individual is exactly what they want, because our respect for the First Amendment means we will expect and respect all opinions. If this individual is there expressing support for ICE, that's their constitutional right to do so, and they need to be protected. Don't allow that to be a catalyst to create violence. We believe in states' rights. We believe the federal government needs to stay out of this. We believe that the situation has gotten worse and less safe because of their presence. And I will just say there were two incidents yesterday I saw after this that just tore at my soul. I saw an individual at the scene identify themselves as medical personnel, a physician, and asked to provide aid, and an ICE agent said, "I do not care." That lack of humanity was chilling to me. And after this incident happened, and after the tensions rose, ICE agents entered a Minnesota school, causing disruptions at that school. I can't say this strongly enough as governor, as a parent, as a teacher. To our elected representatives, Democrats and Republicans, I beg you, I implore you to tell them to stay out of our schools. This tragedy will be magnified 100-fold if this fight moves into the hallways of our public schools amongst our youth. And they're watching us. They're watching us now, how we respond. So I've got a few simple asks. Let us, the professionals, handle this on Minnesota soil, this investigation. De-escalate this situation by removing yourselves from this situation with these 2,000 agents that were put here. And above all else, stay out of our schools. I'd like to ask you to care, but that might be a step too far for some people. But I know Minnesotans care. So we'll protest peacefully. We will win in courts. We will certainly win in the defense of our democracy, because the American people see what's happening here. But the way that we don't win and the way that we lose, if this turns towards violence and allows them to escalate. It cannot happen. So I ask the grass top leaders out there, the faith leaders, the folks who are on the streets, and in many times the true leaders are not the elected officials. They're the folks on the ground. I beg you, implore you, follow those words of the leaders we've had. I had the privilege of serving with John Lewis, and John talked about good trouble. I'm not telling you not to find good trouble, but I asked John many times, I said, "John, I don't know if I'd have your self-restraint. Didn't you want to lash out?" He said, "Yes, daily." But he said, "I wanted to win this. I wanted to do what's right, and I wanted justice to prevail. And to do that, I knew the only way was to not lash out, to not give in to that." So to each and every one of you, we're not going to win this through violence. We're going to win it through justice. We're going to win it through compassion. We're going to win it through Minnesota Nice, and we're going to win it by holding every one of these people accountable as they should for what we've seen on the streets of Minneapolis. With that, I'm going to turn to Commissioner Jacobson to give you a situation update.
Thank you, Governor. Again, I'm Bob Jacobson, and it is my honor to serve as the Commissioner of Public Safety. First of all, again, I want to express my sincere condolences to the loved ones of Renee Nicole Good. Someone has lost their life, and that is not something that anyone takes lightly. Minnesotans came out yesterday to express their grief, their frustration, and their anger at this terrible tragedy. I expect that they will continue to come out today. And I want to thank everyone who demonstrated peacefully. This helped honor Renee's memory and gave her family space to mourn. Minnesota's residents and visitors have the right to demonstrate and to exercise their First Amendment rights. I want to remind everyone that there are safe ways to do so. Our goal is to reduce tensions, to avoid conflict, and to maintain a calm environment. As I mentioned yesterday, we recommend the following safe and lawful ways to demonstrate. Please get together peacefully with others in public areas where pedestrians are allowed. March or walk together in pedestrian areas, please, not on the roadways. Make your voice heard through chants, speeches, and displaying signs. And there are a few things I just want to mention very quickly that are unsafe. Because as always, our top priority is public safety, and we cannot allow behaviors that create hazards, threaten public safety, or disrupt emergency services or endanger people nearby. That would include certainly demonstrating on the freeway, walking on highways, throwing objects, setting things on fire, property damage, graffiti, fireworks, illegal weapons, reckless and dangerous driving, or assaultive or aggressive behavior. I know that we all want more definitive answers about that fatal shooting that occurred yesterday. And as we are able to get those answers and dispel rumors and false information, then we can rightfully honor Renee's memory and help her family, loved ones, and our community heal. With that, I'll turn it back to Governor Walz and maybe a few questions.
Please. Esme? I have not. As I said yesterday, I did speak to Secretary Noem and received a lot of talking points. I will note that I asked Secretary Noem how she would have felt if President Biden had sent 2,000 troops into Rapid City, South Dakota, and she said she would have welcomed them. I leave that for the folks of South Dakota to determine. I've not spoken to the president. I would ask him, first of all, the goal here is to make America safe, is what he said. There is no verifiable evidence that any of this is making America safer. I would ask him to de-escalate in the moment, to allow Minnesotans to back up and grieve, to allow this investigation to be played out by the rule of law. I said it again, I have not passed any judgment on this. And to please, whatever it is, leave Minnesota alone.
In the White House, what you see here is Minnesota Governor Tim Walz giving an update on the ICE shooting that resulted in the death of a woman. But the White House is seeking formal approval for its East Wing project. The National Capital Planning Commission is set to review it after receiving the formal submission today. The proposal the White House submitted says the renovation will address a long-standing need for a larger indoor event space. Right now, groups with more than 200 people require hundreds of thousands of dollars for tents and lawn maintenance. The changes to the historic building face lawsuits and congressional inquiries. There will be a little less traffic in outer space today. NASA has postponed a scheduled spacewalk due to a, quote, medical concern. Officials wouldn't give more information about the matter. Astronauts Mike Finke and Zena Cardman were set to exit an International Space Station airlock to finish work on a power channel. No word yet on when the spacewalk will be rescheduled. We'll be keeping you updated, though. And coming up, French farmers protest an EU trade deal with 5 South American countries. Demonstrators block roads with their tractors in Paris. And lawmakers react to a video showing an attack on protesters by a Chinese consulate security guard in Los Angeles. Those stories and more ahead. I'm Stephania Cox, and this is World Watch. Russia says it will consider any Western troops sent to Ukraine as legitimate military targets. Moscow's statement comes after Britain and France announced the deployment of a multinational force in the event of a ceasefire. French President Emmanuel Macron said it could involve sending thousands of French troops. Russia has consistently said it will never accept Western forces in Ukraine since its full-scale invasion in 2022. Ukraine is seeking firm security guarantees as part of any peace settlement in order to prevent a future Russian invasion. The U.S. has ruled out sending its own troops to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Moscow has ramped up its attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure as it makes gains on the battlefield. Ukrainian officials were racing to restore power today after Russian sky strikes in the southeast. And French farmers drove dozens of tractors into Paris this morning. They're protesting the European Union's planned trade deal with 5 South American nations. The protesters blocked roads into the French capital and several of the city's landmarks. Farmers in France have denounced the trade deal with Brazil, Argentina, Bolivia, Paraguay, and Uruguay for years, arguing that the agreement would hurt their livelihoods. Several trade unions called for the protests in Paris, saying the deal will flood the EU with cheap food imports. And Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has announced a national inquiry into anti-Semitism. The probe comes weeks after 2 gunmen opened fire on a Jewish holiday gathering at Bondi Beach in Sydney, killing 15 people.
This Royal Commission is the right format, the right duration and the right terms of reference to deliver the right outcome for our national unity and our national security. Of course, a Royal Commission is not the beginning or the end of what Australia must do to eradicate anti-Semitism or protect ourselves from terrorism or strengthen our social cohesion. That's an ongoing national effort for all of us as individuals, but also institutions. Because an attack on Jewish Australians is an attack on all Australians.
A Royal Commission is the most significant independent public inquiry that can be held in Australia. Albanese said the group will investigate the prevalence of anti-Semitism in the country, as well as the circumstances of the Bondi mass shooting. The Commission will also make recommendations for law enforcement, strengthening social cohesion and countering the spread of extremism. A report is due by December 14th, the first anniversary of the shooting. Police killed one of the shooters during the attack. The surviving suspect, who is the other shooter's son, faces dozens of criminal charges, including murder and terrorism. And House lawmakers are condemning a recent attack on protesters by a Chinese consulate security guard outside the Los Angeles consulate. The guard can be seen spraying a chemical spray several times at the demonstrators, landing some of them in the hospital. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has the details.
Absolutely unacceptable. Trying to inhibit the freedom of speech. No way, shape, or form is that acceptable in any way. And I hope, the hammer is brought down on them.
Free, free China! Free, free China!
About 24 pro-democracy activists were celebrating the capture of former Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro outside of the Los Angeles Chinese consulate on Sunday. They were also calling on the Chinese Communist Party to end its authoritarian suppression. After some verbal exchanges, the consulate's armed security guard, Wu Xian, can be seen on video making some threats against the protesters and then spraying them with a chemical spray. The demonstrators say that at least 8 people were sprayed, 5 of whom received hospital treatment. A group organizer says he was in the hospital for 10 hours. According to his medical evaluation, he experienced burns to both eyes, a dry cough, shortness of breath, chest pain, nausea, and vomiting.
Ever since Tiananmen Square, we've known that China will use techniques that are unacceptable, and it doesn't surprise me that even in the United States, China would do that.
We believe that there is freedom of speech here in America. We don't always have to agree, but we need to be respectful to each other and our differing thoughts.
Obviously, that's extremely concerning if you're seeing, force used against people who are peacefully protesting, especially protesting in favor of democracy, and if it involves foreign elements, that's even more concerning.
The security guard Wu was arrested by police shortly after the incident. The Los Angeles Police Department confirmed that a suspect was taken into custody for allegedly violating a state law provision governing the purchase, possession, or use of tear gas or any tear gas weapon.
My Venezuelan friends told me that when people fight for freedom back home, the government shoots them. That immediately made me think of China's June 4th. Our suffering hasn't ended. We hope that one day, like Venezuela, we can also bring an end to authoritarian rule. I urge the U.S. and the international community, just as you once helped the Venezuelan people push back against Maduro's regime, please also support the Chinese people.
Some of the protesters also say they plan on filing a civil suit against the security guard demanding compensation. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Thank you, Jason. And a State Department spokesperson told the Epoch Times that it is closely following the pepper spray incident and that repression of the First Amendment will not be tolerated. Stay with us. Vice President Vance and Caroline Leavitt will hold a White House press briefing at 1 p.m. You can watch it right here after this break.